We're going to begin the ad hoc Affordable Housing Committee meeting, and we've got one bill. It's on second reading. It's BL 2019-1472, Bedney Sledge Cooper. It says amend section 2.210. .020 of the Metro Code of Laws to require an appropriation to the Barnes Fund for Affordable Housing equal to future economic and community development incentive grant payments. This has been referred to Personnel Public Information also and already disapproved by Budget and Finance. We've got a letter from the sponsor. Is there a motion? Any discussion? Mr. Hastings.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair, and legal. I'm not sure. Could you please give us a brief update on why the Budget and Finance actually came against this?
I can confirm that the Budget Committee did disapprove this, but there was a lengthy discussion that preceded it.
Okay.
And I think there was some concern about whether or not the funding would be exclusive. In other words, could the Barnes Fund continue to receive appropriations from other sources other than just matching incentive grants? That was not the sponsor's intent. He does have an amendment to clarify that any funding that the Barnes Fund would get by virtue of receiving matching dollars equivalent to incentive grants would not be in lieu of any other appropriation they might get from the metropolitan government. But that amendment wasn't pending at the time of the budget discussion. That is a vague recollection of a lengthy discussion, so there may have been other reasons behind the disapproval.
And go ahead.
So we're at this point here to where we're saying this is a one-time, this is not a continual thing that will be going on to fill that void. And this is something that we can't necessarily count on if there's no upcoming things that we are doing for incentives for companies or any other land vision or whatever else that we have here in the government. Is that correct?
Well, if I'm understanding correctly, let me back up. So the Barnes Fund in the previous budget got a $10 million allocation from the administration. That's not mandated by law. There's no provision in the code that requires the administration to give them $10 million. That was not out of the goodness of their hearts necessarily, but that's just what they happen to allocate that year. They can continue to do that by requiring that the Barnes Fund from this point forward receive matching dollars for every economic incentive we award. That in no way prohibits the administration from continuing to give whatever amount they may or may not be inclined to give. Now, would the administration, let's say, I'm just making up a number, let's say they were inclined to give another $10 million, but the Barnes Fund received $1 million by virtue of the matching grant. Would the administration then be inclined to drop down to $9 million? I could easily envision that, but the two are not tied at all. Whatever the Barnes Fund would get by virtue of matching dollars has no prohibition on receiving additional funds from the administration, more or less.
Well, thank you very much. That clarifies some things here, and evidently the Budget and Finance did a thorough job on this evidently beforehand. And there are some open areas to where questions that we need to answer for the continuation. And this is a program that we want to see to make it to another day, but not something on in case or a one-time gig. We want to continue to meet the needs of the community and making sure that people in the city have proper places to live. That is not on just a program by program basis. That is on a needed basis here in the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Mr. Jameson mentioned the amendment. Does somebody want to move the amendment? And any discussion on the amendment? I'll call on Mr. Sledge for that.
Thank you, Chair. So Oh, there we go. As indicated, the amendment is meant to sort of clear up one of the discussion points that did come from Budget and Finance Committee to indicate that this is not intended to preclude or exclude any other funding that might be proposed for the Barnes Fund. So with that in mind, I think the amendment is worth discussing. I can tie that into a larger discussion on the bill. So I just ask folks' support of the amendment for right now.
Any other discussion on the amendment? All right, all in favor of the amendment, say aye. Any opposed? All right, the amendment is added. So can I have a motion to move the bill as amended? All right, any discussion? I know I've got Councilmember Allen is up next.
Thank you. Picking up on what Councilmember Hastings had said, I mean, we've had great administrations that since this has been formed under the Dean administration, there's always been a $10 million, or there's been a large allocation, and it has now dependably been a $10 million allocation, but there's nothing to guarantee that into the future. And so at this point, the short-term rental income has a piece that will go to this, and now this would add a second piece so that even if we had an administration that did not have this as a top priority, this could at least add some kind of, not guarantee, but some kind of almost guarantee that in years that we had an economic incentive, and if we continue to have short-term rental, there will be some source of income into the Barnes Fund. So I think those are good things that should be taken into consideration.
Councilmember Sledge.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, just to expound upon a couple things that Councilor Allen mentioned. So right now, we do roll in about $1 million a year that we get from short-term rentals as part of the $10 million that has been allocated toward the Barnes Fund. So when you see $10 million, it includes the $1 million and change that we're getting right now from short-term rentals. Now, that's fine as far as I'm concerned, but I think to enhance what Councilor Allen was saying about the fact that if we do come upon a time or an administration where that level is not seen as beneficiary or it's not a priority, a bill like this would enable those matching funds to be, boom, put in the budget, no discussion, because we will have required it as a body, meaning that that $1 million-ish guarantee that's happening right now bumps up to something more like $4 to $5 million, depending on how many incentives we've got out there at the time. I believe the administration had told me they don't have any time, they haven't had any time in the recent past that these incentives have gone above sort of a $4 million a year mark as far as what our obligations are. So we're not talking about a massive amount of money, but it is important to ensure that it was there. One other point I do want to make, the motivations for this bill, and I don't want to speak for the sponsor, but my motivation for signing on to this was we've got a lot of indication that when these companies come, they not only create the jobs that they're bringing, but they create jobs around those jobs, right? For Amazon, the number is basically 3 sort of service sector jobs for every 1 Amazon job that's created. That's fantastic, but we're not creating the housing support to basically account for those 3 service sector jobs that are coming in when we're already in an affordable housing shortage. And one of the big things that a lot of us have heard from our discussions with members in other cities who have experienced this Amazon growth is the thing that they were not prepared for was how fast Amazon would grow, just to use an example, and how much of an impact it would have on the housing. So I know that this is not one company specific. This is incentive wide on this particular incentive, as I think it should be. We just need to be acknowledging that as we plan for jobs that come in that are great and well-paying and meet all the standards that we're looking for them to meet, there will be other jobs that are created, which is also great, but they're not going to be at the same pay level, and they're not going to be competing in the same housing market. And we need to acknowledge that as a city and do what we can to help supplement. So with that, I would ask the committee support of the bill.
Councilmember Davis.
I apologize, I missed that first part. What can you explain again, or somebody, what flexibility the amendment gives us, or what exactly, like, how does that make it a little bit more flexible?
Sure. Here's how I understand it. So let's use the example that the administration's been doing $10 million a year, and let's say that there's $1 million worth of job credits that are being given out. So if we pass this bill, then the administration could keep the Barnes funding right at 10 million, as it has. The only thing that it really does as a mandatory nature is, as Councilmember Allen and Sledge were mentioning, if there was an administration that decided it didn't want to materially support the Barnes Fund, there'd be a floor added. And there's already a floor from the short-term rental revenue that has to go and into the Barnes Fund, and this would add to what the floor is. And so if we imagine that the short-term rental money making up a number is $1 million and there were job credit money of $1 million, then that means that there's for sure $2 million that's going to go to the Barnes Fund. If an administration said, well, we want it to be 8 or 10 or 12, then this doesn't really matter that much. If you wanted to make it go away completely from the Barnes Fund, then this floor would be in place. Does anybody think I got that wrong?
Okay, well, yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, and I think that, sort of eases it. It's not like a pile-on of affordable housing money. If we're already doing that 10 million, we sort of get credit for that.
There is no requirement from this whatsoever to add more on top of what historical, or the historical for the last 3 years, appropriation has been. So if it's been 10 million and the mayor wanted to keep it at 10 million, the fact that there was $1 million worth of job credit money would not make it go up to 11 at all.
Cool. Well, excellent. I really like this, and I think it, again, we're similar to some of the other things we were doing this meeting. We're sending a message saying, hey, we want to keep that affordable housing funding, if we're going to do the incentives and that sort of thing, let's keep up with the Joneses with the affordable housing funds. And, Colby, Councilmember Sledge raised a great point about these incentives do create that sort of thing. And you can see it anecdotally. I mean, when people, the influx we're getting here in town, just on the simple, someone's renovating, investors are renovating this house, or they're tearing this one down and building a couple houses. And someone moving out of town that's getting a really good job, it's nothing for them to just go ahead and buy that $400,000, $500,000 house, but then you've got the service sector jobs that are created all around the orbit of that company, which is very true. Maybe there's a brewery or something that opens up right next to them. We can serve them, but so that it's just, I see it on the ground out there that we have these other smaller companies that aren't high margin, high dollar companies that have good, decent jobs though, and they need places to live. And so yeah, I think it's really good how it is now, and I plan to support. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All right, we're voting on the bill as amended. All in favor of recommending approval, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we have voted to recommend approval as amended. And that's all we've got, so that will be adjourned. Thanks.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.